Modern games have trained players to stop thinking for themselves, and I watched it happen in real time. My brother was stuck on a puzzle in Crimson Desert. He's standing in front of a locked door, circling the room, checking every corner. He's been at it for about 20 minutes, and I'm just watching him, not saying anything because I want to see how he solves it. And the weird part, it's not a hard puzzle. It's just a normal game puzzle. Eventually, he turns to me and he goes, "I don't know what to do, but these things on the walls look like targets." And I said, "Well, maybe they are." He pulls out his bow, shoots both of the circles, and the doors open. 5 seconds. That's how long it took once he stopped waiting for the game to tell him what to do and actually trusted his own instincts. And that moment, that's what modern games have been quietly training out of us. So today, I want to talk about how we got here, how hand-holding became the default, what we actually lost in the process, and why Crimson Desert, for better or worse, is one of the clearest stress tests of modern players we've seen in years. Because this isn't really a story about one game. It's about what happens when a game stops holding your hand and players realize modern gaming has made them dumb. Crimson Desert launched in 2026 to pretty polarizing reviews. Critics landed somewhere around a 7.8, but the user score was an 8.8. That's one of the biggest gaps we've seen this year, and the reason says a lot more about modern games than it does about Crimson Desert, because a huge chunk of the complaints from critics to players weren't about performance or story or combat, it was the puzzles. They're too hard, too cryptic, too much figuring things out on your own. But here's the thing, the puzzles aren't hard, they're just puzzles. Old school, trust the player, use your brain kind of puzzles. And somewhere along the way, a lot of players stopped knowing how to play like that. Let's start at the beginning. There's an actual Wikipedia article that's been written, cited, and maintained about the yellow paint debate in video games. If you want a sign that something has shifted in game design, that's probably it. Mirror's Edge popularized the idea of using color to mark traversal routes. It made sense there. That game was about momentum, and stopping to figure out where to go would kill the entire experience. And that had a real design argument to it. But then we got the rest of the industry pushing for photorealism. Think about games like Uncharted. As graphics got better, environments got louder. Forests became dense with foliage, mountains became littered with thousands of highly detailed, hyper-realistic rocks, and suddenly developers had a massive problem. In a world where everything looks real, how do you tell the player which specific rock they can actually grab? Their answer was yellow paint. Every climbable ledge was yellow. Every rope is yellow, every crate yellow. And to be fair, it started as a necessary band-aid for visual clutter, but somewhere along the way, it stopped being a technical fix and became a design crutch. Instead of building intuitively readable environments, developers just slapped a coat of paint on the world and called it a day. And then that philosophy bled from the environments right into the UI. A great example of this is Assassin's Creed Valhalla. You pull up the map and there are 47 icons already visible, locations you haven't discovered, points of interest that you haven't asked about. The game has pre-answered every question before you could even form your own. You haven't even done anything yet, and the game has already done the thinking for you. That's not guidance. That's a game playing itself while you hold the controller. What started as a reasonable solution to one specific problem became the industry's default setting. And every time another major studio shipped a game with glowing ledges and a minimap full of icons, they were quietly teaching their audience something. You don't need to read the environment, you don't need to figure this out, we'll do it for you. And the audience, unfortunately, listened. Which brings up the obvious question. If this is such a problem, how did games ever work before? And here's the thing, the games that trusted players the most are still the ones people talk about decades later. Let's look at Super Metroid. Game designers have a name for what it does. They call it the invisible hand. The game does guide you. The level layout subtly funnels you towards the morph ball. Environmental set pieces demonstrate what your abilities can do before you need them, but it never admits it's guiding you. There's no pop-up, no glowing marker, no tutorial box. It trusts you to see something, wonder about it, and eventually try it. The guidance is woven into the world so naturally that players genuinely believe they're figuring something out on their own, because in a meaningful sense, they are. Compare that to Zelda. The original Zelda dropped you into a field with a sword and said nothing. You figured out there was a cave, you figured out what was in it, you figured out the rules of the world through curiosity, not instruction. That used to be the baseline expectation of a game. And then there's Hidetaka Miyazaki, the director of Dark Souls. He once described that as a child, he read English fantasy novels he barely understood. He couldn't grasp every word, so he filled in the gaps himself. His imagination constructed meaning from fragments. He found it more compelling than books he fully understood. That experience is literally baked into From Software's design philosophy. The world doesn't explain itself. Item descriptions give you lore and fragments. NPCs speak in riddles. The environment is the story. And because of that, Dark Souls has a community that is still making discovery videos over a decade later, because the game trusted players to engage and the players rose to meet it. And none of that is possible if you pre-fill the map with icons. Which brings me to Crimson Desert and to the moment that made this video necessary. When review copies went out before launch, something embarrassing happened. Gaming journalists, professional paid-to-play games journalists, got stuck on the tutorial puzzle. Not a late game challenge or an optional secret, the very first puzzle in the entire game. So Pearl Abyss, the developer, took notice. And what did they do? They added enormous spotlights pointing directly at the solution, yellow paint. Essentially turning their own opening puzzle into the exact design pattern they were supposed to be pushing back against. And here's the irony that should make your jaw drop. There is a Steam community thread dated right around launch titled, "Thank you Pearl Abyss for not including yellow paint." And then, in the one-day patch, they added it anyway, because critics couldn't solve the tutorial without it. That is the problem in a single news story. A game celebrated for trusting its players caved within 24 hours. Not because the players asked, but because the press did. And the press couldn't figure out a tutorial because after 2 decades of yellow paint, they had stopped expecting games to ask them to think. This isn't a problem with Crimson Desert, it's a diagnosis, and Crimson Desert is the patient zero that revealed it. Now here's where I want to be honest with you directly. Think about the last time a game put you in front of an environmental puzzle, not a combat challenge, but something where you had to look at the room and figure out the solution. And ask yourself, how long did you wait before opening a guide? Not because you were genuinely stuck, but because waiting for the answer felt faster than thinking. If that hits home, this section is specifically for you. When a game marks every climbable surface in yellow, it removes the need to read environments. When the minimap preloads every POI, it removes the need to develop spatial curiosity. When a quest marker tells you exactly where to go, it removes the need to actually listen to what an NPC is saying. When a glowing item tells you what matters, it removes the need to evaluate your surroundings at all. Each of those things, reading environments, spatial curiosity, parsing dialogue for cues, evaluating what's in front of you, those are problem-solving muscles. And like any muscle, if you stop using them, they atrophy. Modern game design has spent roughly 2 decades systematically removing the need to use those muscles, not out of malice, out of genuinely reasonable desire to not frustrate players into quitting. But the cumulative effect is a generation of players who, when handed a game that doesn't do this, experience real cognitive friction. Their brains look for the yellow paint, it scans for the icon, it waits for the pop-up, and when none of those come, it calls the game broken. My brother stood in front of that door and knew the circles looked like targets. He said it out loud. The answer was already in his head, but no game in recent memory had asked him to act on that instinct without first putting a flashing indicator on it. So it didn't even register as a real option. The imagination was there, he'd just been trained out of trusting it. So here's where I land. Crimson Desert isn't a perfect game. The reviews will tell you that. Pacing issues, rough edges, a story that doesn't always hit, but its puzzle design, its willingness to put 2 circles on a wall and trust that you'll figure out that they're targets, that's not a design flaw. That's a game remembering what games used to be. And the response it got tells us everything. Players who've been on a diet of glowing cues and pre-filled minimaps encountered actual game design and called it broken. But the players who leaned in and let themselves think gave it an 8.8 user score, one of the most discussed gaming experiences of the year. My brother opened that door. He looked genuinely proud of himself for about 2 seconds before he moved on to the next room. What I don't know is whether the next time he'll reach for a guide before he reaches for the instinct. I'm not sure which way he'll go, but I hope he trusts himself, because the feeling on the other side of that door is too good to trade for a yellow waypoint. If this resonated with you, or if you think I'm completely wrong and handholding is actually just fine, I want to hear it. Drop your take in the comments below. What was the last game that actually made you stop and think? And what was the last one that completely played itself for you? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you want more video essays like this, make sure to like and subscribe. I've got a lot more of these coming. Thank you for watching. I'm Darth Trooper Gaming, and I will see you in the next video.